Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review. In a stunning and unprecedented move, Israel carried out a long-range airstrike in the heart of Doha, Qatar, targeting Hamas's political leadership in what IDF officials dubbed Operation Summit of Fire. The international fallout has been harsh, and it still remains unclear which Hamas leaders were killed or injured. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz has the latest.
What we know is this. After months of secret preparation, at least 10 Israeli Air Force fighters dropped multiple munitions on a building in Doha, where top Hamas officials were gathered to discuss a U.S.-backed ceasefire proposal. The strike, conducted over 1,100 miles from Israel, was approved by Israel's Security Cabinet, but kept secret from the broader government. The operation was run from the Shin Bet's command center, with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Defense Minister Katz, and Israel's senior security chiefs present. The decision to strike had been made weeks ago. Hamas confirmed that 5 of its members were killed, including the son and aide of Khalil al-Hayya, but claims its top negotiators survived. Israeli officials say they believe several senior leaders were wounded or killed, and say it could take some time before the results are known. The gathering was believed to include all of the terror group's top leadership outside Gaza, including the leader of Hamas's Gaza units, Khalil al-Hayya, Zahir Jabrin, who heads Hamas in Judea and Samaria, Mohammed Darwish, the head of Hamas's Shura Council, and Khalid Mashal, the head of Hamas abroad. Despite claiming that Israel had failed in the operation, Hamas offered no immediate proof that its top leaders had survived. The terror group has been known in the past to only confirm the death of its leaders weeks or months after the fact. Operation Summit of Fire marks the first time Israel has struck within sovereign Qatari territory, and comes after threats from IDF Chief of Staff Samir, who warned last month that Hamas leaders abroad will be reached. For Israel, the operation is considered a closing of the circle against Hamas leaders who took part in planning the October 7th assault. The Shin Bet issued a statement of reminder of its vow at the start of the war to reach Hamas leaders everywhere.
And joining us now with more on the Israeli strikes against Hamas leaders in Qatar and the aftermath is Ori Sachar, Director of Research at the Israel Defense and Securities Forum. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lida. Good to be with you.
So we see Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu immediately take credit for the strike in Doha. And then after initial reports that U.S. President Trump gave the green light for this operation, we see President Trump sort of distancing himself from the attack, saying it's unfortunate. However, not so unfortunate that Israel targeted Hamas. So what do you make of these comments? And how likely is it that Israel would strike in Doha without the U.S. go-ahead?
Well, it's definitely unprecedented, and Israel in that marked how it's willing to go and break the glass ceiling, the self-imposed glass ceiling, and carry out much more daring activities, if you will. Israel's audacity is coming into play here. And I think many Israelis felt that Qatar has been harboring terrorism, and since October 7 especially, these people, really the genocidal leaders of Hamas, have no right to keep walking among us, and every day these guys are alive is another ticking time bomb, and they have absolutely no right to continue to live. But always this game, and as you see on the screen, they celebrated right on the morning of October 7 as Israelis were butchered and kidnapped. But there was always the feeling that Qatar, the state, while harboring these mass murders, was also, had a seat at the table. That's why they were harboring them in the first place, right? So the hope was that Qatar will assist in carrying out these negotiations, and for a while it worked. But we see how Hamas persists with this refusal, and Qatar is not playing ball anymore, and Israel decided to embark on this action. And as you said, the White House tried to distance itself. That's the role of the political diplomatic jargon. Let's not be too worried about that. I think everybody's quietly happy about it today.
And now we have heard from Qatar that they are considering retaliation against Israel for the strikes. Is that likely, and what sort of retaliation could we be looking at?
I don't think it's likely. I think Qatar's retaliation is manifesting itself every single day by continuing to harbor mass murderers. Just 2 days ago, they murdered 6 more Jewish people in Jerusalem. And I think that every day they keep harboring them and giving them, like in the US, if you have sanctuary cities for criminals, so Qatar is a sanctuary state for terrorists. And it's very evident to see that Qatar has not ceased its willingness to keep hosting these mass murders. Every day, Qatar has been hosting them is a kind of retaliation. So I wouldn't jump too much ahead if I were them.
And when will we likely know if the operation was indeed successful? And if it wasn't, if Israel was unable to take out the Hamas leadership in the strike, was this a one-time opportunity, sort of an historic miss?
There are always more opportunities, but let's wait and see. I think Israel definitely has a very high chance of taking down at least some of the Hamas leaders. And, it sends a great message of deterrence. I hear leaders around the world, you mentioned the White House at first, the U.S. administration, in my view, is perfectly aligned with Israel's goals. But, you watch across Europe at the United Kingdom and France and other countries, and the way they are reacting to this activity is not baffling because it's not surprising, but it is very disappointing. To align with Qatar, to express total support for a country that is harboring terrorists. Can Israel harbor terrorists? Can the United Kingdom harbor terrorists? So there is a vast area of political consideration. There is a chessboard, and we all understand that. But this is not without you cannot overlook the kind of soft influence that Qatar has on his countries. We remember Qatargate in the European Parliament a few years ago when Qatar attempted to buy off European representatives earning their wage from taxpayer money in the European Union. We see how Qatar really is flooding the zone in Europe, in the United States, with billions of dollars on academia, popular culture, and all in order to get to this very moment where these leaders are demanded and requested to bow down, kiss the ring, if you will, and express support and solidarity for Qatar. I wish they reserved some of the harsh words that they expressed to Israel toward Qatar, because Qatar's activities in the past few years really show that it is a very sophisticated, very manipulative actor, but it's also harboring terrorists, and this is absolutely unacceptable.
Absolutely. Ori Saschar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
We open with the terror attack in Jerusalem at 10:20 this morning. 2 terrorist gunmen opened fire at a bus stop at the entrance to Jerusalem in the remote neighborhood on Yigal Yadin Street. 6 people were killed in the attack on bus passengers and nearby passengers and pedestrians. 10 others were wounded in the attack, with 5 listed in critical condition. The victims were named as Rabbi Yosef David, age 48, Israel Matzner, 28, Yaakov Pinto, 25, an immigrant from Spain, Sarah Mendelson, age 60, Rabbi Mordechai Steinzeg, aged 79, and Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Pash, 75 years old. All were Jerusalem residents. May their memories be a blessing. According to initial reports, one of the gunmen was neutralized by a soldier on the scene and a second by an armed civilian. Security forces and first responders were quickly on the scene to treat and evacuate the wounded. The terrorists were Palestinian residents of villages near the site of the attack, but on the other side of the security fence. And it's believed that they entered Israel illegally. Prime Minister Netanyahu was at the scene of the attack. Let's take a listen.
אנחנו עכשיו במרדף, בכיתור של הכפרים שמהם באו המרצחים, ואנחנו נשיג את כל מי שסייע בעדם, כל מי ששילח אותם, ואנחנו ננקוט בצעדים קשים עוד יותר. אני רוצה לומר בצורה הכי ברורה, הרציחות הללו, הפיגועים הללו, בכל הגזרות, הם לא מרפים את ידינו. הם רק מגדילים את הנחישות שלנו, להשלים את המשימות שלקחנו על עצמנו. גם בעזה, גם ביהודה ושומרון, בכל מקום. אנחנו נלחמים בטרור, במשטר הטרור של החות'ים, באיראן שמגבה את כולם, בעזה, בלבנון, בחיזבאללה, בכל הגזרות. אנחנו לא מרפים וגם לא נרפה. אנחנו נעצים את הפעולות שלנו ואנחנו נשיג את כל המטרות שלנו.
And joining me now from Jerusalem is Fleur Hassan Nahum, the former deputy mayor of the Israeli capital. Fleur, thanks so much for joining us today. First, I'd like, if I could, I'd like to take a moment together with you to reflect on these victims, 2 rabbis, 2 young men, 2 women in their 50s. We've both viewed so many terror sites in Jerusalem over the years. Emotionally, where did this take you?
Well, it took me to the place of when I arrived in this country in 2001 of the Second Intifada, where we had the audacity to offer the then leader of the Palestinian people, Yasser Arafat, everything he said he wanted. And then instead of accepting a state or even negotiating for a better deal, he decided to open the Intifada on the streets of Jerusalem. And as you know, we were living in a moment where there were shootings, there were bus bombs, there were suicide bombers, there were cafe attacks all the time in Jerusalem. But I want to also remind everyone that the year before October 7th, we saw a huge increase in terrorist attacks in the city of Jerusalem, in our capital city, including 10, 12 people killed outside a synagogue in Pisgat Zev, if you remember that. Okay. And so, unfortunately, Jerusalem has always been the focus of these horrible, brutal attacks on civilians. They went to attack and to kill civilians. And unfortunately, as you know, we lull ourselves sometimes into a false sense of security. We're not that secure.
Well, Fleur, I recently moved back to Jerusalem after 25 years in Har Adar, actually next to the village, Keitana, where the gunman came from. Let's face it, entry into Jerusalem is wide open. There are so many ways to come into the city around the security barriers. Can that ever change?
Well, we managed to change it after 2001 Intifada when we built a wall that we're so criticized for, but it was a really solid wall. And we did stop 90% of the attacks. Also, you have to remember, these people are trying all the time. And the Israeli security really manages to stop 95% of attacks. But just because they manage to stop 95% of attacks, it doesn't mean that they're trying all the time. And unfortunately, some slip through.
Fleur, I've noticed that in the west side of the city, it's filled with Jerusalem Arabs, not Israeli citizens necessarily. I include in those people my doctors, employees in most of the tourist stores, and literally thousands of Jerusalem Arabs wearing orange vests as city workers. They're my neighbors, and I feel safe. But Jerusalem is a very mixed city. How can one possibly know who might present a danger?
That's a great question, and I think we all feel so much less secure after October 7th, because remember that the terrorists, those barbarians that came into the villages around Gaza, were working. Many of them were working in those houses. Many of them, you know, had friendships, or at least the Israelis thought that they were real friendships. Look, I have to say that as somebody who worked in the city of Jerusalem for 8 years, and even now, the attackers of this horrible attack are from Judea and Samaria, are from the West Bank. There is now a report that they were aided and abetted by an East Jerusalem residents. But let me tell you, for the most part, East Jerusalem residents just want to get on with their lives. They have embraced the help that the city has given them in terms of economic development. And after October 7th, many of them were like, no, this has nothing to do with us. But having said all that, there are radical elements in certain villages in East Jerusalem, and we have to constantly be vigilant of these groups. The city of Jerusalem does a lot of work also on social media to follow if there's any radicals in any groups, and to always have our finger on the pulse.
Fleur, I wanted to use your diplomatic expertise to ask you about the Trump plan, but we're going to have to wait for a few days and see how that pans out. But just give me a nod or a head or not. Do you think it's a serious development? Are we really heading toward a potential deal with Hamas? What do you think?
Well, I pray we are, because Hamas is desperate enough now that they're seeing that we're serious about going into Gaza City.
Thanks so much, Fleur.
Thank you.
And meanwhile, the IDF has issued the largest evacuation order yet for Gaza City as the military prepares for a full-scale invasion. Israel effectively ordered all of Gaza City to evacuate. The widespread evacuation order says all Palestinian civilians must leave the entire city immediately ahead of the military ground offensive against Hamas. Previous warnings issued by the IDF in recent days had only included specific buildings and the area surrounding them. Palestinian civilians were instructed to head to the Israeli-designated humanitarian zone in the Strip South via the coastal road. The announcement also provided a phone number for Palestinians to report Hamas roadblocks or attempts by its members to prevent evacuation. The IDF says that as of now, some 150,000 residents have evacuated Gaza following recent directives, and the numbers could rise dramatically in the coming days. And it's day 704 of the war in Gaza. The army announced the deaths of 4 soldiers who were killed in a Hamas attack on the outskirts of Gaza City. The fallen were named as Staff Sergeant Uri Lamed, 20 years old, from Tel Aviv, Sergeant Amit Aryeh Regev, 19, from Modi'in, Sergeant Gadi Kotal, 20, from Kibbutz Afikim, and Lieutenant Matan Abramovitz, 21, from Ganei Tikva. All of the fallen served in the 401st Armored Brigade's 52nd Battalion. May their memories be a blessing. According to a preliminary IDF probe, 3 Hamas operatives launched an attack on an army encampment in the Kfar Jabalia area on the outskirts of Gaza City's Sheikh Radwan neighborhood. The incident took place shortly after troops had returned to the outpost following overnight activity. The operatives reached a tank to the entrance of the encampment and opened fire at the commander, who had his head outside the armored vehicle's open hatch. The gunmen then hurled an explosive device inside the tank, leading to the deaths of the 4 soldiers. The probe also found that other soldiers stationed in the encampment returned fire at the fleeing gunmen, with at least 2 of them being hit. And back to the news. We're joined by ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian, who has the details on the families of the hostages who are expressing outrage and anger over the strikes that targeted senior Hamas leadership in Doha, Qatar, as they fear it could now jeopardize any chance of reaching a deal to get their loved ones' homes. It comes at the same time Israel is set to welcome home an Iraqi Hezbollah hostage in the coming days after 2.5 years in captivity. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian joins us now with more. Shosh, let's start with the families of hostages in Gaza. Tell us how they're feeling right now.
Well, so Lidar, there's 2 different movements for the families of hostages in Gaza, with the families part of the Tikva Forum basically saying this attack on Hamas's leadership should have happened a long time ago. And they welcome the operation with open arms, as they say it strengthens the political echelon here in Israel, and that it's the only way for Israel to win the war and bring home all of the hostages. Well, meanwhile, the families part of the Hostages and Missing Families Forum say they have deep concerns and heavy anxiety with what took place, as they think this could lead to a lesser chance of a deal being reached. The cousin of Tal Haimi, whose body is being held by Hamas in Gaza still, reacts to the news of the strike, as the terror group said their leaders were meeting at the moment the strike took place to discuss the new proposal on the table that seeks the release of all 48 hostages. Here's what he had to say.
To be honest, I'm horrified at the idea that when we finally had an American-led deal that could have led to the release of all hostages, this is the action that took place. I have no regret in seeing these people punished. They are all a part of the people that massacred, that planned what happened on October 7th. However, the only way that my cousin Tal will be back for burial is by a negotiated deal, and this is what everybody needs to focus on at this point, no matter be it the mediators, be it Israel, and be it anyone else involved.
It's unclear if Israel's assassination attempts will impact the negotiations to reach a deal, but Israeli officials claim it will actually advance the negotiations, according to the Jerusalem Post. Gal Hirsch, Israel's point man with hostage negotiations, says Hamas's leadership in Doha has been a key obstacle to reaching an agreement. Meanwhile, President Trump announced overnight that Israeli-Russian hostage Elizabeth Surkov was released from captivity from the pro-Iranian Khatib Hezbollah terror group. In a post on Truth Social, the president said Surkov was safe and at the American embassy in Iraq after being tortured for many months. She was kidnapped in March of 2023 while conducting research in Iraq as a student at Princeton University. The terror group released a proof-of-life video more than a year ago of the 38-year-old. And Lidar Surkov was in captivity for about 2.5 years and is expected to be flown to Israel within the next coming days. She's also expected to undergo a very similar process as the hostages released from Hamas captivity underwent, according to Israeli media. And her family says they are just completely overjoyed that their daughter is finally coming home and that she will be treated in this special ward for her health and any type of medical conditions. It's unclear what concessions were actually made to bring her home. Lidar?
Thank you, Shosh, for the report. Airstrikes in northeastern Lebanon, killing 5 Hezbollah terrorists at a military training base. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz has the details.
The IDF strikes on a Hezbollah training base come amid the terror group's refusal to disarm, despite Lebanese government demands that it do so. Even with the ceasefire ongoing, Israel continues to hit Hezbollah targets when they are found to be in violation of understandings between Jerusalem and Beirut. The strikes in northeastern Lebanon near Syria, far from the country's border with Israel, are rare. IDF Arabic military spokesman Avichai Edri said the Air Force targeted Hezbollah positions and infrastructure, including a training area for the group's elite Radwan forces. The facilities were used to train operatives and prepare attacks against IDF troops and Israel, including gunfire drills and other weapons exercises. The army said the storage of the weapons and the activities of the Hezbollah terror organization at these sites constitute a blatant violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon and constitute a threat to the state of Israel. The statement went on, the IDF will continue to operate to remove any threat to the state of Israel and will prevent the reestablishment of the Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon. Last November, a ceasefire went into effect requiring Hezbollah to withdraw north of the Litani River.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week.